All right. Well, if any of you want to adopt more minis, we certainly may. However, I have a nice Stein. Actually, here, if I want to hashtag not sponsored. This orange vanilla Coke Zero is amazing. Cheers. It's good stuff. Dark Wolf is saying check the creations. Oh, hey! Look at that. For no reason. I like the ampersand on there, too. Thank you very much for that, Dark Wolf. And by the way, on Friday's D&D time, if you're wondering what the heck happened in MS Paint, this happened in Game 1, and Trust a Flump can back me up on that. I do want to point out here that there's a lot of amazing stuff you all are sharing. Nightwolf is sharing this D&D group setup here with these tiles. Coffee Cat is sharing his Tuesday games deceased fiance, Karina Moonflower, as well as Mouse, his Nosferatu that is running with Macabre Derek. And Dark Wolf has been very busy in Chibify as well as Fox in the Box. This is a character named Cellcrest. You can see her on D&D time as well. But these are representations of and Coffee Cat made an alternate Celine. But yeah, this is y'all are having some fun here in Chibify. Oh, and Emmy made a tiefling as well. So thank you all for sharing this stuff. It really makes me happy to see this. There's a lot of really good talent out there, including Fano Le Jongleur. He shares juggling videos, very accomplished, and that can serve to give some inspiration for, if you have a character that does that, or you want to know some sleight of hand tricks, watch his videos. It's cool stuff. I'm gonna run to Daly's gonna run to my kitchen and grab a soda. I think there's only one more of these left, Daly. If you want it, you can have it, but I can only promise that after this, the only other sort of exotic flavored Diet Coke I have is it's one of the slim cans. It's not the new blueberry acai. It's not the strawberry guava. Why am I forgetting? It's not the blood orange either, because I wanted to get the orange vanilla. It would have been redundant. I'm derping out. No, it's not the mango nor the ginger one. I think there's there has to be like one left. I just wish Chibify had a few more options, but I had fun with it. I think you did an excellent job, Dark Wolf. Thank you so much. Cannot resist the box. Oh yes, I have some fun in D&D time, because when something kind of dramatic happens, because I don't have to be on camera, I keep MS Paint open, and I'll do a fun kind of scrubby sketch about something that's occurred. So I have a couple illustrations of Zuzip doing some stuff, my Blossomer Florin, and now I'm getting a couple pictures of my bunny folk, my little bun. Tissix is getting in on the adventures now. Grand Adventure, you said bring back Missy Elliott for Coke Zero 2020. Vanilla Coke, I mean. Oh, you want her to do, Grand Adventure, you want her to do a rap kind of like for the Mountain Dew with he and Peter Dinklage, or she and Peter Dinklage? I do, but their little tendrils just kind of, Oh, she did the original for Vanilla Coke back in the day. I did not know that. Blood Deuce is here too. You can always do it later. Yeah, Trust the Flump is waiting 10 minutes. Wiggles away for a moment. All right, 10-minute timer. If no one adopts this last box of Mad Maga, then Flump, I guess, is going to jump on that grenade for everyone. Poor Diadems is poor Diadems is tempting the Flump. You all are amazing people. So what I wanted to bring up tonight too, while we're having some fun conversation, over the course of the week as we've been making these artificers, someone had mentioned that alchemists weren't so much the chemical engineers, maybe a bit more of the mad science-y, I'm pouring potions and whatnot, but instead they're a lot like chemists from Final Fantasy Tactics. Now, if you're not familiar with Tactics, that's fine. You don't need to have that previous knowledge. And it really got me thinking. You know, I was sitting on this idea for the week as we were making these characters, we're coming up with these concepts, and for an adventure, I mean, a full campaign, or at least an adventure that would take an elite squad of soldiers who are all artificers in some way. What if we were to plan an adventure for this kind of squad? And some interesting considerations may need to be brought up, because artificers don't just do well in combat. Artificers do well in social, well, they can do well in social situations, like a social combat, definitely skill challenges, and they can do so much stuff during downtime activities. And a campaign that has an artificer, let alone several, will do well to understand that if you want to fully explore the artificer, if you want to maximize, or at least not even maximize, to allow for the full opportunity for an artificer to be an artificer, you're going to have things like downtime. And so the ideas were floating around in my head. GM Vault, yeah, you can PayPal. In fact, I think the donation button offers a PayPal option. If it doesn't, then I can send you an email for that. GM Vault, let me know what's going on. Grand Adventure, it's not fine if you're not familiar with FFT. Delita and TG Sid are the greatest characters in all of Final Fantasy. And I want to be careful that we're not going to retell that, but what I want to do here, Grand Adventure... Okay, yeah, Streamlabs. What I want to do is, let's plan a map. And then after that, let's come up with an adventure outline that would allow for a squad of 5 soldiers to go on this adventure and sort of move region to region, allowing for some downtime and other things like that to really allow them to have combat. And because of the modular nature of artificers, right, they can change their cantrips, they can change their spells, they can change their infusions, all with long rests. This can allow them to prepare for an encounter of some kind. Example, they start in the city, and they understand that this elite squad needs to go out to the desert to check in on the desert orcs that exist out there. Knowing that they're going to come up to that situation, it can allow for travel time, and maybe all the artificers have like an in-between time, spell list. If you want to have a random encounter, that's fine. But then we load the map, right? And the artificers can prepare for this battle and see what happens. Because, of course, you can prepare for a battle, but who knows what the DM is going to do in the midst of that battle. Various effects can take place. It was a trick. There's a lot of things that can happen over the course of an adventure. And I thought that would be a really cool way to approach an adventure. As often, and I'm guilty, I mean, not that guilty is a bad thing of this, I love that epic storytelling, that Tolkien You start off as the small little hobbit, and you end up over a volcano called Mount Doom in the middle of Mordor, after trekking hundreds of miles through all sorts of things, and we follow along every step of the way. And many of us may very well run games like that. And so to take a step away from that classic style of storytelling, you know, the epic step-by-step adventure, what if we were to sit down and try and design a campaign, or just at least an adventure, if not a full campaign? If we were to design an adventure around the premise that you have a map, and we're going to develop that. You know, the map's going to have different locations that are going to be interesting, and we'll account for that as well. And the artificers, in order to really allow them to breathe and to have downtime and to interact with people and make things and sell things and such, how can we plan that? And I think it's not that difficult to do, and it's going to be a fun exercise. Now, in the title, I didn't just put Final Fantasy Tactics, I also put Valkyria Chronicles. Have any of you played Valkyria Chronicles, or you're familiar with it? Trust the Flump is saying to GM Vault, may you get the best Death Tyrant ever. Alright, and it does, I did receive a notification. So we are good to go to pop open these miniatures of my last box before a restock of Dungeon of the Mad Mage are going to GM Vault, and let's find out what's inside. You know I have the first three at least. That's all right. Then Grand Adventure. As we're planning a map, or we're gonna sit down and come up with this adventure premise, you are always welcome. Not just you, Adventure, but everyone is welcome to give ideas, to share their experiences, to help relay an idea of some kind. Because this isn't just me. This isn't my campaign. This is something we're building together, enjoying together. You know, we can share, we can push up our glasses, real or imaginary, and share the things that we know with each other in order to make a better conversation, thought experiment, whatever, for everyone else. Okay. Let's start with some commons. GM Vault, I'm coming for your brain. You have an Intellect Devourer. An Intellect Devourer. This one's also lifting its leg. A little bit of spinal fluid might be leaking out there. Watch out. Watch out you don't step in it. After that, you have this fun little short stack, Gnome Inquisitive. She's on the trail. She has a magnifying glass. Is that a wand? Might be a wand. And a backpack and a cowboy hat, and she's ready to go. It's like every box has a head crab. Next up, Delcorin. Next up, you have an uncommon a veteran leader. Nice dual wielder, solid figure, good armor. I love the cape, very dynamic. A veteran leader. And lastly, but not leastly, GM Vault, you have a Froghemoth. Right up. Right up. With all its tentacly glory, its big old tongue, its 3 eyes. In comparison, we can even just kind of put the veteran here. The poor veteran's getting eaten by the Froghemoth. And so that puts our Storm Kings back there. GM Vault, thank you for given these minis a good home. And let's mark your box. And I'll make sure that these minis get updated in that handy-dandy spreadsheet after the broadcast. Let's see, for you, GM Vault, square, that kind of bank vault looking spinny do. GM Vault. Yep, alright, you want me to... alright, I'll take them down to the store and they'll go out on Monday, GM. If you want to pull the trigger on that, that's perfectly fine. We're good. Grand Adventure says, I would enjoy that. I've sold 3 D&D campaigns in my life, and storyboarding is my passion. Well then, we're going to get to it. What I want to do first, our settlement concept worksheet here is, it's more for like a focused region or a city. And we're going to be coming back to this. What I want to do first is I want to build a map. We'll have it. It can have whatever, right? We're not necessarily tied to a particular region. Now, if we want inspiration, remember, as a DM, there is so much stuff on your player character sheets. The personality traits, the ideals, bonds, and flaws, all can help your world come alive. Now, especially if you have druids and rangers, that can help you focus some kind of a terrain. Whether it's, immediate, or it's constant, or you're going to get to it finally. A couple considerations that came up are we have a distant city of Yuan-Ti that is going to be a destination. Probably the last destination and the culmination of everything we're doing. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you can go back on the VODs, or you'll see this up. You'll see this up on YouTube after the broadcast. But we have to consider a locale for a Yuan-Ti city of some kind, as well. I'm sorry, Edward was the Yuan-Ti. Ellie is our orc, and so we need to consider an orcish home of some kind. Both of these are probably going to be fairly different, and both of them should be distant from our starting area. Now, looking at the 3 other characters which ended up being out of the player's handbook, none of them are necessarily from a particular region that's hinted at by their background. I mean, Lierza is a wagon maker. Presumably, then she comes from a place where there's abundant wood or access to metal for, joints and nails and that sort of stuff. Hinges and shocks and such. Gaffer here can be from anywhere, right? He's a hermit. He started out with the group. We narrated that at some point in time he wandered away. He went AWOL, and he comes back now with kind of an El Dorado-style madness in his eyes. And so he's going to lead people back, while El Dorado is going to be this Yuan-Ti city. But there's a Yuan-Ti in the group who wants to go there too, because regardless of people's opinions of Yuan-Ti, and heck, in this campaign world, maybe the Yuan-Ti are friends or trading partners. It's a lot nicer trading goods and services than it is to trade, arrows and slings. And then lastly, we had Dunboot, the brand fast hand here. He's a mountain dwarf, presumably comes from a mountainous area. He's our gunslinger. Now, Lierza is good with explosives. We made her like the team's explosive expert. He's really good with guns. And so if we have a mountainous area, then this is a place where not only metal, but the materials to make black powder or some sort of a refined, whatever you want to call it, black powder, fire sand, just gunpowder. In my campaign world, don't you love when people preface that? I'm not going to get pretentious with it, I promise. Guns are that because they are items that that can be savage and can attack ferociously, kind of shooting fire out the front, and they have a good kick and a bite to them. They're called guns because it's short for dragons. So people are wielding dragons, but the term kind of corrupted. So instead of gons, G-O-N-S, people just started calling them guns. I'm wielding guns, and that's a fun little world building, piece of fluff that you can throw in there. Maybe a lot of the guns have a little like a dragon motif, or the iron sights are kind of like a dragon head, and you're looking through the mouth at where you're aiming the fire. In my world. That does sound pretentious. I'm sorry, everyone. So we're relatively free, and also using clues from the conversations that we all have in chat, because I pay attention to it. I'm not just a beautiful face selling plastic minis. I am that too, but I'm not just that. Orcs Make Beautiful Lovers had stopped in here a couple times, and he was talking about different kinds of orcs. We may consider orcs to be, mountainous, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're barbarians living in the mountains. They're gray, maybe they kind of blend in. Or maybe orcs kind of live out in the open plains and they rove around. Orcs Make Beautiful Lovers was talking about desert orcs and forest orcs, in that orcs have, orcs in his concept have a way to adapt to the surroundings in some form or fashion. And what could be very interesting is to have the Yuan-Ti are probably going to want someplace warm, and it might, if it's too stereotypical, we can offer something up. But why don't we go for a jungle area, right? Tropical. And the orcs, why don't we have the orcs be desert orcs? And that is where her people, this is where Ellie's people come from. In fact, we can even have, because we're talking about an usurper, right, with her background. Again, if you want to go back and watch, she has an awesome, compelling story. She's not just an orc, or just an orcish artificer. She has an awesome story. So it seems like an usurper, maybe from a forest, so we could have a forest bordering on a desert, came and married into her tribe and is trying to take it over. And she said, oh, heck no, and is now out to try and oust the usurper. So there, you see what we can pull just from our players' character sheets? Anyway, I have MS Paint open. This is the tool of professionals. MS Paint and a regular mouse, not even a drawing pad. If you want to know how elementary we can make this stuff, planning an adventure as a DM doesn't have to take a lot of resources. Now, I have Wonder Draft. I love Wonder Draft, and maybe we can recreate the map that we're going to make here in Wonder Draft to make it more detailed. That could be a lot of fun. As our campaigns kind of cycle over 2 weeks. But I want to do some setup and some planning tonight to end this broadcast week. And if we want to continue this thought, we can tomorrow. Otherwise, if we finish up and we have a really solid idea for a campaign for 5 artificers, this elite soldier strike force, we're playing this like Final Fantasy Tactics, like Valkyria Chronicles, then let's do so. So we know that we're going to have a forest, we know we're going to have a desert, and we know that we're going to have a jungle. They're probably not going to be next to each other. And if we take a look at... If we take a look at the druid, now the ranger has this, but the druid has it really nicely identified. There are 8 broad biomes that are recognized in 5th edition. Arctic, coast, desert, forest, grassland, mountain, swamp, and underdark. Druids can get spells from these regions. Rangers can be adept at these regions. And so if we break down the biomes, the terrain of a world into these 8 categories, then it can make decision making either easier, or it allows us to open ourselves up for randomization. For example, if I rolled a D8, that could give us our starting city location. Now, it could be in a mountain, it could be in a desert, but maybe the desert's so broad that the desert orcs live on their own side of the desert. I don't know. Let's find out, huh? Let's go over to our handy-dandy dice roller. Let's make a couple notes first. Starting location. We rolled a 1. Arctic. Okay. If we want, if we want to tell a story, again, this is as a dungeon master, we're considering we've had something like a session 0. We're there for the development of the characters with our players. There's a couple presumptions we're baking into this, so please be aware. We know that this matron, this middle-aged, matronly orc, wants to get her tribe back, and we know ultimately that Edward, our Yuan-Ti pureblood, wants to recover his homeland from an evil entity that has taken it over. And if the Yuan-Ti are running scared from an evil entity, what's going on? If we're making a generalized, a premise. This overarching evil entity sounds like this could make for a really good finale to the adventure. And what better way to take on, a big bad evil guy, a BBEG, than with this elite squad commanding a horde of orcs and bringing them into the jungle and making war on this, and then thereby this elite squad wins the favor of orcs and Yuan-Ti. Everyone's a hero, everyone wins. Thems that die be the lucky ones, maybe. I'm sure some bad things can happen when we're talking about these different regions. So we know that our starting location is going to be Arctic, and let's produce some terrain that's going to lead us to about a midway point, right? Our midway point is the Orcish Desert. Our ending point, I don't know, maybe swamp, a swamp or jungle. Jungle is its own thing? No, so it would probably be swamp, would be considered that. I mean, a forest, yeah, forest could be a jungle as well. I mean, there's warm coasts, there's cold. So I guess we could have savanna too, and so the Yuan-Ti live there. I definitely would like the orcs to be in the desert. Based on the conversations we have, because I want to favor the thoughts that we have first, because as we're talking, we're inspired. We're making connections. We never really discussed the end point. So I reckon, I don't know, I guess, desert, forest, grassland, or swamp. I'll roll a d4. The orcs, so her orcs could very well be nomadic in some way. Well, war camps are very nomadic in themselves. We never really determined that per se, just that a forest orc kind of came in and married her son or daughter and took over. She didn't like it. She tried to oust him, and she got driven off in defeat. She ended up meeting up with this group, then I guess back in the Arctic area, and was recruited, and she's been bending this group to try and reclaim her homeland. Ooh, pardon me. So let's roll a d4 and find out where the Yuan-Ti live. 4. Okay, I guess it's swamp. Now, some other locations that we're going to be aware of, there has to be a forest somewhere-ish close to the desert for there to be interaction. And so this could be up to us to decide, all right, where in the adventure would we want this to happen? And, you know, honestly, you know, we could just even collapse this and make a list and realize that we need a waypoint, Orcish Forest, a waypoint of some kind of our overarching geography. Let's roll a d8 and find out what corner of a world. Is this going to be more of a Mediterranean, a Middle Eastern? Are we talking South America? Are we talking, you know, Netherlands? You know, the steppes of Russia? Because all these things can exist in this. What is our overarching geography? Let's roll a d8. We rolled an 8. The Underdark. Ooh. Maybe if it's not overarching. If it's not overarching, this could be the way that we get around. Maybe we have to go underground for some reason in order to travel. You know, is this some kind of like a Dark Sun environment? Is this, maybe it's super mountainous above ground, but not really in a hospitable way where, you know, we can yodel and raise yaks and, you know, eat Ricola cough drops and blow into giant horns. So why would we have an underarching or an underpinning geography of the Underdark? Where could that play into this? For infiltration, perhaps? For an environmental concern of some kind? But then again, we have to come back up, right? What if it's really watery, maybe? Is it an island chain that kind of has their own little biomes, and the only way to connect is a series of underground tunnels? I don't know. Like a too brutal of a desert? Okay, yeah, so we could do something like that. I mean, heck, if we're looking at Final Fantasy Tactics, or, you know, Final Fantasy 12, the majority of what takes place in that world, in Ivlis, well, I guess it's not necessarily the world, but of the primary region, is desert. And so it could be, yeah. Oh, I like this Trustaflumph. I'm digging it. So there's a waypoint, and then we could probably, we can then generate a couple other little interesting bits along the way. But I think we have a solid start to a prompt to just create on a canvas. Look, as a DM, and I really want to enforce this, just create. Just tell a story. Trust yourself and your instincts. And it can be difficult sometimes to conceptualize an idea. I encounter this very often. You know, until you put a drop of paint on that miniature, you can be stuck in a paralysis of choice or indecision. But once you paint that person's vest blue, all of a sudden, oh, a blue vest, that reminds me of Barada, and that reminds me of Barada. It's suddenly blue, and then there's some gold. Oh, of course he has purple hair. Duh. And just 5 minutes ago, you had no clue what you were going to paint that character's hair, but now, duh, it's purple. A really cool location could be an ancient petrified worm of some kind that's half burrowed out of the sand and stretches into the Underdark cavern system. Yeah, and that might even reinforce, that could be an excellent landmark, Trustaflumph, that can reinforce that somewhere, like something happened in this region that, you know, blasted the lands except for some sheltered areas, and even, you know, altered the ecosystem. I said Ivalice, king, and we're forming this in a Final Fantasy Tactics style. In fact, we're gonna make our map. We can even put the little dotted waypoints between the cities. This is D&D FFT / Valkyria Chronicles, by the way. So can you accept Valkyria Chronicles? All right, we want to crawl across a map. Starting location. All right, the starting location is going to be Arctic, and Arctic can work very well in a desert. In fact, deserts are often just like tundra, right? A desert's a place of low precipitation, and that can happen. It can be cold. They don't have to be hot. Are we still using D&D races when we could be using FF races? I'm sure if we want to reskin some races, we probably could. If you want to say that our orc is a banga or bagna, the N and the G are somewhere in there. We have a Yuan-Ti, you know, someone who tries to be is pretending to be a person. I don't know who that could translate to. But if instead, I mean, it's a male character, but if instead you want to reskin the Yuan-Ti as Viera, they're just very poisonous rabbits. You know, and then they can only talk to rabbits with their innate charms and magic, as per Volo's guide here, right? Poison spray cantrip, animal friendship, as long as it's with snakes, and then you can cast suggestion. Then we could you could reskin it very easily, I suppose. Good. Yeah, Black Wolf over here is a player killer. Black Wolf, the PKer. Vera would easily cast a suggestion. Funny Dill, welcome. All right, our starting area is Arctic. Of course, Arctic could just be the desert that we're talking about, too. If we did that... Ooh. No, I think it'd be dynamic to have... If we're talking video games, to have snow levels and desert levels. Yes, because of the artificer... being kind of like machinist and chemist, and we're having squad-based combat, like an elite forces group in tactical combat. I want to draw inspiration from those two games, Funny Dill, as we're creating our campaign environment, and as we're going to plot out an adventure outline for our squad of 5 artificers. Funny Dill, you magical man, demon of the world of fantasy. He wants his setting to look that way, maybe have similar themes, but he hasn't committed to a FF campaign or a Valkyria campaign. I mean, if you want this to be not World War II, you know, and instead of set in, like, Europe, it could be set in my chain or my cord. Yeah, well, Funny, you're welcome to throw out suggestions. I got you, Black Wolf. All right, our starting area is going to be someplace Arctic, very cold. And overall, the overreaching, or in this case, the underpinning geography is going to be Underdark. And maybe in a way, then, we can make 2 maps at the same time. Because I'm a mad lad. There we go. Vistalt the Frigid Doom within the city of Gloomshiver. So if we want to draw inspiration from that, we can do so. You know, many times we think of the cold north. We can have the cold south. This could be a southern hemisphere setting if we want. And for, let's see, again, I just want to put digital paint on paper here. We're going to have a desert someplace. We're going to end in a Yuan-Ti swamp. We're going to have a forest, and there's going to be some underpinning geography of the Underdark. So let's make... I want a thicker line than that. Maybe some glacial stuff is happening here. It's kind of pushing out in two directions. Carved out this area. We're gonna make some mountains that can help border and contain, in a sense. This is gonna be a broader geographic, look than we may normally have. Speaking of Vestals, I have been meaning to reply to a question on the Discord. Well, what was the question? What's the answer? Clandestine gamers, do you use Wacom or something else for drawing? I am using MS Paint and a normal mouse. That's it. We're keeping it simple. As much as I can on this channel, I stick to the core rule books. You know, I've used OpenOffice forever. I do have Word that you can use, and MS Paint with a mouse. There's some more advanced tools. I have WonderDraft. We can make this map look really pretty. But for basic concept and planning, and for getting into running a game, I want to make sure that we're keeping the... I don't want people to feel like they have to have a bunch of fancy stuff to get into this. And that we can do something just really neat with the tools that most of us probably already have access to. I have not used Hexographer, no. Okay, so about Valkyria themes, what do you have in mind? I was thinking about the obvious weakness in mining of precious minerals. I wasn't necessarily looking at drawing a particular element from Valkyria, except when it comes to things like strategic, squad-based combat. Now, if we want to take inspiration into, you know, that gunpowder doesn't work without a special mineral that has to be mined up, and because our artificers are proficient with guns and explosives, then we can account for that as sort of a parallel to their to Ragnia, that kind of blue glowing vulnerable spot on everything. Warhammer? Maybe? But I was more Valkyria because, you know, magic and technology to an extent exists, guns exist, and we're talking about a strategic, squad-based combat. And I just really like... I'm a weeaboo, so I really like Valkyria Chronicles. Again, for... So, Funny Dill, I'm, on this very broad approach, I want to draw some basic inspiration using comparisons to those two titles. Now, when we get into the campaign planning, then we can talk about a little bit more of the details or the minutia. So, for example, right now we're just planning the region. We rolled the dice. We made up an area in which this adventure will take place. At some point at a midway point, we're going to go into Orcish Desert. The desert can probably be expansive, kind of go off the map. We're drawing, well, I'm drawing on the screen, but we're drawing prompts from some dice rolls and just conversation that we're having as well. Now we could probably border this as well with some other mountains, and how we can explain something like this if there was some kind of a great disaster. In fact, ooh, what if we're making almost like a crater, right? Something crashed here a long time ago, and it caused the climate to shift and a lot of other things to happen. An orcish desert because one of our characters that we generated is from a desert region, and she's an orc. And by going through what we've developed by our characters, it's an exercise as a DM to extract information from the characters our players wish to pilot and translate that into the world. Now, what else do we need here? Oh, we're going to need a Yuan-Ti swamp of some kind. Oh, all right, here we go. This makes for some interesting storytelling as well. So we have, if we're saying there's been some kind of an explosion or an impact or the like, the Yuan-Ti could have been people who lived in this area and sort of mutated over time. And they did so through, I don't know, magic or radiation or whatnot. And a good example is, unless I'm passing along a really good folktale about Venus flytraps, the only place they're known to exist in the world is in a swamp that is in a meteor crash site in North Carolina. If I recall correctly, that's the only place you can find them naturally in the world. And so, of course, you hear something like that, and that spurs the imagination of, oh, a plant that eats animals that only grows in a swamp created by an ancient meteor impact site. And what that can mean is we can put that kind of as this fusion of mountains, almost in its own caldera. It's sealed off. So maybe it impacted right here. The meteor skipped, right? It crashed and it tumbled and it went and burst down through this area here, creating just a little area that could be in a colder region, but it stayed warm through geothermal, through geothermal means. So maybe there was some kind of, it touches onto the mantle. I know that's kind of a long way down, but, or there's something along the lines where if there's not lava, then at least it's close enough or far enough down in the ground that it has, it's heated. Water pours in, doesn't really pour out. We do have entrances to and from the Underdark, but the wound in the earth was cauterized by the extreme heat and circumstances of this meteor that fell, and so there's really only one way in. And it'll be up to the players to figure that out so that they can go to the Yuan-Ti. And of course, if the Yuan-Ti can escape, the Yuan-Ti have figured out how to get out, but they've kept it secret. How advanced tactics would this considered being? Not attacking an enemy barbarian that is causing damage for the sole purpose of letting their rage stop, or attacking your ally to keep their rage going. I don't know if that's advanced tactics, more like metagaming. That really depends on the setup of the party. If the player who's piloting the barbarian, if in character he or she says, you know, if everyone knows that the more that she gets feisty in combat, that the angrier she stays and she performs well, someone might choose to attack her then. Otherwise, if it's not really been discussed and it's just more people are talking rules out of a book, that's kind of metagamey to me. And, If it's an enemy using it in combat, I guess that would come down to how do you know how that enemy is using that mechanic. For example, Funny Dill, I can describe to you an orc that runs up and starts savaging the party. And you may take that as, oh, it's a barbarian, guys don't attack it, and it won't deal as much damage. Just, you know, eat damage for a round and it'll calm down. And meanwhile, I just described the orc as being savage. It has no special abilities. So you have to be, you know, having a crossover of realism versus mechanics versus metagaming versus all this can sometimes be a difficult thing to balance. But can you imagine a general several hundred feet away watching a fight take place in a valley below, you know, giving the orders to the people in the middle of a swirling combat of, don't attack them, they're barbarians, they need to be hit every turn to get extra damage. So if culturally in a game, let's say, you know, you as the DM have presented that these particular people of a certain race, or a particular sub-race or region even, have demonstrated these berserker-style qualities. And it has been shown in-game through storytelling that this could be a viable tactic. Personally, I'm open-minded to that, and often as a DM, I provide those clues. Whether it's in the middle of combat or just regionally, you know, you can investigate and ask questions. But it's important to just realize that even if your DM slips and says, oops, I forgot to add rage damage, how far do you want to take that? How do you want to, now knowing that there's a barbarian template on the enemy, you suddenly say, you know, stop attacking and their rage will drop? You know, different groups are going to handle it differently. Some groups have no problem with metagaming because it's fun. We just want to roll some dice and whatever. Others are completely story driven, and that would ruin the suspense, the immersion, the creativity, etc. Whoops. I have a gap somewhere. There it is. Coffee Cat, I'm a very story-driven player. Anything that takes me out of the immersion is not cool with me. And Funny Dill says, but that is a good question. How does one learn of abilities as a scholar learning of a spell? In-game research. You can ask your DM for a knowledge check, maybe. What do I know about these people? What do I know about this culture, their religion? What do I know about magic? Or what do I know about something? And so you can research it. It could be a part of your character's background or backstory. There's a lot of ways that you can still get this information without it seeming a little ham-handed or ham-fisted. Hello, Physaris. Guten Morgen to you. It's good to see you back. I got a wacky idea of a tailor using telekinesis to attack with thousands of needles. Is he dressed all in green and runs around? Sorcery points and in-game logic. An internal energy. Just the ability to control your magic. It's magic muscle, really. I mean, how many times can you lift, do bench presses until your arms tire out? But the more that you bench press, the stronger you get, the more repetitions that you can have. So sorcery points are like a magic muscle, because magic is intrinsic to sorcerers, so it's a part of their body. Sorcery points reflect a magic muscle that you work out. All right, now let's put some of this kind of wasteland a little bit around as a buffer. Kind of comes out across, stretches down, but maybe it retreats back and the sand's blowing out through the south. So this can give us something like a true desert. We need an orcish forest of some kind. And the forest should be closer to the desert. Maybe we can put that up here. We'll get a little bit of green space, maybe some grassland. The forest continues upwards. So if the impact happened to the south, there might be more green up north here. We're going to need some kind of a source of water, though, in the desert, and maybe one that... let's see, if we're saying that glaciers and stuff push out this way, we could even say that, let's see, so these are probably buffering. If the weather is blowing across, the mountains are going to block a lot of that. There's going to be some kind of a lake. Maybe it could even be a big frozen lake. Yeah, let's put it like a big frozen lake, like right here. And there's all the glacial melt and all the stuff that happens kind of coming off and down. Remember, water takes the path of least resistance. We are implying topography from our mountains here. Comes down here, so maybe there's a pool that our one civilization lives next, like our starting area. It flows outwards. It forms a bigger one here because of the meltwater coming down from these two. now a bigger stream flows this way. And through the wasteland here, because the mountain catches the storms that are blowing west to east, I guess we can presume, there might not necessarily be any pools or nothing big like a lake, but there might be just some little rivulets here. And we can create a bunch of stuff like alluvial fans and in the waste and mudslides that kind of come down from the mountains because of that. So this doesn't have to be grassland per se. We can maybe make a little border of grassland around the lake. But maybe this area has more. Yeah, we'll put a little lake here. There we go. Bunch of little streams, things that the mountain catches. The rain, which is preventing it from crossing over the top of these mountains and thereby helping to exacerbate the desert that exists on the other side of them. And then now we get like a nice little stream, a little thicker, that can come down this way. And around here, let's put a little blush of life. All right, but now it's getting a little too cold, and we're going to still stay in the Arctic area here. So it's just like a little aura of grass and development, or natural development anyway. And by the way, it helps if you tell stories like, it helps if you tell stories like this while you're creating a map or a character or all this other fun stuff. It reminds you of what's happening, you know, who would live somewhere, who would do something. Whoops. Oh no, the world's flooding! Sorry, catching him in chat here. Black Wolf, you're talking about mind over matter. Well, sorcery, yeah, it could be something along those lines. You know, your control over the, you know, your mind controlling the matter of magic. Funny, but for tactics, I'm also talking about the idea of having things like firing squads and such paladins having healers to keep them, healed, as they fought, being a self-sufficient unit, both healing when necessary and when not. Well, hopefully they're not healing when it's not necessary. Tactics are more than just a meta. It's knowledge that translates to combat. Because at what point does tactics go to meta? No, if we can still talk strategy, that's fine, Funny Dill. And I'm not saying it would be impossible to understand in-game that Barbarian rages and to understand the D&D 5th edition mechanics to a raging character. It's possible. It's the presentation that for many is going to be the make or break. Is this role-playing or is this metagaming? Alright, so we have this. This little swirl here is probably going to catch. Right, so the weather is blowing up this way from west to east. But some of it is catching. Oh, this would be cool. So what if there's like a hole that goes down to the mantle? It creates steam vents, but the whole thing, because there's like a slow leak down into the mantle of the world. The entire swamp has this Coriolis effect. Now, depending on the hemisphere, which way is it going to go? But what if the whole swamp slowly drains, but also continuously fills because the mountains continually pour water down into it? And so the Yuan-Ti live on a society that fluctuates up and down and is always kind of it's kind of circling the drain at all points in time. That can provide an interesting threat. What if this evil is something that came down with the meteor and clawed its way up? Ooh. You see how just drawing a map in MS Paint can unlock a lot of ideas? Now, if you think that's a bogus idea, I mean, let me know, and that's fine. One thing I find that I try to do is that one of my players pretty much already know what's going on beforehand. Yeah, it's going to vary table to table, encounter to encounter. So maybe there's like a couple little lakes. Maybe these ones are frozen here. But as we continue to go up, we have something more like, let's see if there's an impact area. Like a big chip. So we have kind of like oh, on this one, it's a little warmer, the water flows. There's a bunch of waterfalls that cascade down into the swamp and kind of aerate this area. So it's a little fresher water. There we go. And these ones, you know, it might have some trickles coming from beneath the ice down in here. In fact, we could even say if the water is moving, really the inside, because the inside is moving more, would be less of a swamp and more like a clear moving lake in the middle of a bunch of slower moving swamp water. So you can almost get an effect like this. There we go. And maybe to make this pop a little better, we'll give it a good swampy... Yeah, there we go. That's a swamp. Could even put a little patch of, you know, a little bit of land or something here. Just on the edge. You had a question, what is in the game considered a surface? A surface was presumably a hard horizontal. I mean, it could be vertical. I mean, there are distinctive... for the placement of turrets, it says it has to be a horizontal surface. So I would imagine it's just, like, not water, not lava. You know, just a hard, relatively flat or steady place to walk or sit or something. Ultimately, that could be a DM's call, though. Funny Dill. And really, if we want to make this more of a blasted land, then we're going to have to put a... There we go. So here's our wasteland area. Here's our Arctic area down here. And, here's our true desert. In fact, we can even, if we want, we can even kind of fill things in a little bit and put another one. If this is kind of sucking in all the water and it's draining in slowly here, we could even have a desert relatively close to the mountains on this side. And there's our little wasteland area before it. A lot of open terrain, very mountainous. We can also put little... We can draw more stuff in here, too. You know, we have this, like, reddish brown to indicate that maybe this is some kind of igneous. This was caused by, like, fire and eruption. We could make it black if we really wanted to. But there could be some other little mountains or foothills that exist here of that same color. So the desert kind of has these little monoliths and stuff kind of sticking out of them. Something spanning over the two. Kind of comes over, shows that there's been like a shattering, right? When you're making geography, you're painting the history of the land. You know, the hills are there for a reason. Mountains are there for a reason. You are giving this reason. You're telling a story with this region about what's happening and what's going on. Maybe we can extend the grassland down to hug the mountains here. And they kind of come out and they'll taper off there. And let's make something like a salt lake in the middle of the desert. And we can have some interesting fun here. Maybe the orcs can drink salt water. And so you have a lake that's in the middle of a desert because of all of the minerals and everything that's dissolved into it by the shifting of the sands and the dust, and what water does come down from the mountains does carry salt with it. Salt's is very common. That's why our oceans are salty as they are. And so we can go up here and we can indicate that there is a source of water in the desert, but it's just not hospitable to anyone but maybe orcs and goblins. You know, people who have the green blood, because they, as we talked about earlier in the week, at least in my world, again, it sounds pretentious, in my world, you know, if you have the green blood, it's because you have copper carrying the oxygen through your body, and so it's turning that kind of verdigris color, and therefore it's represented in your skin. So you're getting teals and blues and greens, as opposed to iron, which is giving us reds and browns when it rusts or oxidizes by carrying oxygen through our body. And so maybe due to the physiology, the orcs live here. And you know who else could live here too? The dwarves. The dwarves are immune to poison. Presumably, dwarves can drink salt water. They might not like it. Maybe they do. But the dwarves can drink salt water with no ill effect. And if we want to have skirmishes or ill will between orcs and dwarves, then we've just created an environment and a culture and a biology for that. And what that can also mean is in our team that has a full-blooded orc and a mountain dwarf, that they can get along, right? It may be the exception to the rule, but it's there. And that could be very cool to explore over the course of a campaign. And so there's probably not even little rivers that come through the desert. Instead, as an oasis, it's a spring. It's like an artesian spring. The water from the mountains collects, goes down into the water table. It flows through the bedding, and then it comes up in a spring as an oasis in the desert. By the way, drawing maps and such is excellent to learn about geology and geography, the environment, the climate and weather patterns, and so much other stuff. Ooh, what if we do this? Let's turn the salt water, this kind of grayish color, this gray-blue, let's turn our other sources of water into a more vivid blue. And what that'll do is that'll open up the ability for us to draw glaciers or permafrost or tundra with light blue. Because that's going to fill the majority of what's going on here. So let's have, for any of you in Alaska, or you've seen Bob Ross paint, or you've just seen nature photos, Alaska is a good source of carving out stone and mountains, and as well as for water. And so let's have this represent glacial activity. Whoops. We have an artificial boundary here because we're going to draw an Underdark equivalent. So, you know, the water and everything, like this is kind of melting the glaciers along the way here. And the glaciers are continuing to push. We'll put like little fingers and such kind of reaching forward here. In fact, we can even have a glacier kind of pushing out into the lake like this. And if we really want to encourage that Underdark, we can even go through and say that, you know, this area might be sheltered from the glacier, or they keep the glacier you know, picked at, and so it's not going to crush the village underfoot. They're constantly picking at this thing. They're harvesting the water. They're melting it. Maybe they're using it for their machinery. Because if this glacier is providing so much water and force, we have artificers and other things that are here, and it's also carving out and bringing all the minerals. So these glaciers are just bringing minerals that can just be melted out of the water. So maybe it's actually what if it's actually encased, you know, it's a carve out, it's a holdout in a glacier. And you can follow the river through a glacial tunnel for miles and miles in order to get to this lake. But this serves as a kind of protection for this starting area or city. You know, it can keep it, maybe this is why guns aren't prevalent in the society, because it was invented here. It hasn't really gotten out. And they send people with this special technology out into the world to try and find resources, make contacts, or do whatever. That could be a lot of fun. No lime blood, avocado blood. So orcs are fueled by avocado. In fact, we could probably even put a little on one other little salt lake. Kind of have one. Oh, we'll have a salt lake right here, kind of spanning the wasteland to the true desert area. You know, the eye will, that kind of transition will help. I mean, I'm not saying this is a very well composed painting or anything, but it can help draw the eye, and that could serve also as, you know, people who want to come from here. Oh, we found water. Ah, blarg. No. Oh, we found water. Oh, it's so cold all the time. You know, because this is snow, then we get into ice and all this other stuff. I believe it. Orcs could definitely have guacamole for blood. All right, we have our basic, we have our areas, right? We have our starting location is Arctic. We have our midway point in the story is going to be this orcish desert. And we've created a culture, biology, all this other stuff. Our ending point is a Yuan-Ti swamp that's kind of in the circling the drain mode, which is both literal and metaphorical for the story, because this Yuan-Ti society is on the tipping point, right? This great evil has come, and that's why the Yuan-Ti are leaving and trying to find people to help. There's a waypoint in the story that there's this orcish, there's forest orcs who live up this way. Actually, ooh, let's do this too. Actually, maybe there's a source of water, like a forest, like a river, something off the map. But let's have a river come down through. It runs through the pass of the mountains, but as it flows through the mountains and the desert, it helps feed the oasis. And this could be how the forest orcs and the desert orcs know each other or even trade, even if their biologies don't match. I mean, an orc isn't always just an orc. Maybe our forest orcs can't drink the salt water. And that could be a form of protection in this tribal war. But all the minerals, actually, so if that's the case, the salt will begin sooner. Probably right about here. There we go. Must have powerful hearts? Oh, if they're pumping guacamole? Now, the other component, because in this creative process, Trustaflump was saying, well, maybe the land is blasted, and we came up with an idea for that, right? Look, the map is mostly wasteland and Arctic region that's inaccessible or inhospitable. You know, a lot of the water here can even be frozen over, so getting to fresh water, even if it seems abundant, requires effort, scraping, fire, which requires fuel, whether it's physical or magical resources. So this whole map we're making, you're like, oh, there's some trees, that looks cool. It's very inhospitable because something very inhospitable happened. Oh, hi, Mr. Plunderloot. Though there's this component now, right? This overarching, or in this case, underpinning geography of the Underdark. If there was some kind of a big impact that could have shattered the crust, creating tunnels and pockets and caverns, plus with a lot of the water, the accessible water, having flowed down into it, the water will course through and will carve over time, which is how we can split this map. Oh, Plunder is having a tequila. Well, cheers to you. I have cherry limeade. So, salute. In this case, I think we can create some carve-outs. If we're talking about areas that we would want to explore or to go, let's go back to our pencil tool and create sort of an under image of what we see above. Now, if we treat mountains kind of like icebergs, you know, you see the tip, obviously they're going to go and form with the crust. We can dig tunnels and such through that. But we're getting kind of a vibe if we kind of mirror things. So this comes through the water. The water might dip and drip and go down this way. There's definitely going to be, if that's a lake, the Underdark may not necessarily exist where you have a container like this. And we obviously know, too, that the cauterization of this impact has effectively sealed off the Yuan-Ti from the rest of the world. Now, if they're leaking out, that means that people can get back in. But something's going on here. So we can create a fun little roadmap where aspects of the Underdark can pop up. Now, we could create it anywhere. Look, tunnels could go up, down, all around. They could be flooded. There could be underground rivers or all this other stuff. Again, a bountiful underground sea even. So we can have this set up in a lot of different ways. And it doesn't have to match one for one, or you don't have to dodge mountains if you're going to dig through it. But consider what could be where. Generally, if we're just talking the regions, then we might want to have Underdark Desert region here. And we'll say that the access to it is up this way. And let's put that there's like a big cavern underneath the forest, because the forest is getting enough water to keep the plants and the grasses and everything alive. So a lot of water's come down, made a bunch of caverns here underneath the forest area. There's probably not as much through the desert, because if it's all dry stone, you know, unless there's minerals or things, or who knows, you know, there could be natural cracks from that. But we could also show a different story, or add to our story with this extra map, where we have so the rest of that's kind of sealed off. The initial impact crater where the lake is going to be there we go. Look at that. It's jagged. It shows that, you know, something happened. But of course, this is where the lake rests. And so really the Underdark we're making is going to be sort of tunnels and caverns that come off of this, maybe like a central point that exists. Woo! All roads lead to the Underdark and beyond. Right, so we're making like an explosion. This one branches that way. This one kind of goes over there, does its own little thing. This one even kind of continues down. And this one ends in sort of a like that. Who lives here? What happens? I don't know. But we don't need to know right now, since we're creating what we're creating. Some dead ends. Not everything has to go someplace. You know, this is going to kind of wiggle and worm up to be an extension. Kind of branch off. We'll say it branches off here. Branches off here. Branches off here. Comes over. We can even have areas of our map that are cut off, right? We can dip back down into the Underdark beneath the northwestern desert. But it's only through a cave here that brings us back down. But what if this path leads up here and you have to go above ground because that's just how it is. So you have to go boop, 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 boop. And so maybe the cave up is here in the desert. You have to cross the desert up here, and then you can go back down below ground. And whatever reason, big cavern right there. Who knows? Who cares? This is room for you as a dungeon master to find inspiration and to roll with it. Things don't always have to have a reason. Maybe nothing even lives there, even if they could. But now you have a room for it, and it allows you to have more tools for storytelling. We kind of come up here, and then we're going to create a negative space where this was sealed off. Again, with these are like more cracks that are reaching out to join. There we go. We can make it intertwining, almost like we could create like an underground labyrinth, right? It's super shattered down here. It's really narrow. There's a bunch of, there's a bunch of columns and caves and tight squeezes because everything kind of filled in. So here, you can call it something cool like the Shattered Maze or, or whatever you want. I think you get the idea. And this only adds to the complexity for people who've ever wanted to try and explore the crater in navigating here. And then we can just have that happen. Eh. It's a little better. I hope that's not too jarring on your eyes. If so, then maybe we can go like scarlet and gray. If any of you are like Ohio State fans or something. I like you guys. Yellow is not a nice color. Well, I kind of limited the yellow to the deserts a little bit there because I know it can be jarring. Blue or green is nice. Well, we tried to use it, but unfortunately we're dealing with a bit of a blasted landscape for the purposes of this story. Hey, English Mudkip, welcome. I'm sorry, I was so in the mode of creating this this sort of shadow map or this complementary Underdark map to the region we're making. I didn't see it come in. Anyway, hey, pull up a seat. You're welcome here. No, you're fine, Evelyn. Don't worry about it. And yes, a flump count. We've cracked open 3 flumps so far in our journey through the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Are you going to be running this new campaign? Not necessarily, no. I mean, any of the regions we make, I guess I could always run an adventure in. Could be cool. But I wasn't designing this specifically to run in. Yeah, I got into the zone there, English. Well, not trust the flumps, but the number of flumps that we've seen opened out of that set. Which, you know, it's a common, and I'm a little disappointed we've only cracked open 3. We always have one. Do you wiggle triumphantly, or do you wiggle triflumpfully? Triflumpfully. Let me spell this out. Triflumpfully. Triflumpfully, yes. Triflumpfully. Unoflumpantly. Alright, well, you know what? We have a map. We have an awesome design going. And let's take a break. And when we come back, let's talk about plotting out an adventure for this squad of 5 artificers that are going out and they're going to handle something out in the world. How would we run kind of a Final Fantasy Tactics / Valkyria Chronicles style storytelling, right? Where we more have episodes. We kind of like load in on a map, and then there's time in between to allow for research and all the stuff that artificers can do while we're still telling a story, without having to focus on the minutia of day-to-day getting from the Shire to Mount Doom. In that more like epic storytelling where things unfold, you know, and we're watching all the moments and all this other stuff. How can we make kind of a mission-based or like a self-mission-based episodic adventure that happens? And while we do that, we can use the map that we created and use this as a guide for saying, oh, so they encounter the orcs. What kind of a society do the orcs have? Well, I mean, we know the dominant race. But the ruler status, we can create then in the Dungeon Master's Guide. right? If we go to page 112, the ruler status, we'd roll a d20, and we would find out, I guess we'll just roll it now to show a little ankle. 10. An illegitimate oh my gosh. I mean, I guess I would have, we could have usurped that anyway. This was meant to be, ladies and gentlemen, an illegitimate ruler simmering civil war. That's exactly what we've been going for. But you see what can happen here, right? Oh my gosh. I love it when this stuff happens. The dice have, yes, they have. Ivalon, our ideas as mere mortals have been backed up by an independent third-party verification by the dice gods. Hey, Jericho, welcome. Jericho, you're just in time for us to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be designing this this adventure chronicle, this design. You know, these encounters, the people who live here and there, and to go from that point.